Okay.
All right.
My attention is yours.
So this is John Sweney's Continental. It's exceptionally clean on the inside of the engine bay. You must work really hard at keeping it clean. There's a couple things I noticed when we got started. There's a little bit of oil around his expansion valve going into the evaporator. If he loses his air conditioning one day, that's probably one of the reasons why. When you're looking for air conditioning leaks, you're quite often looking for oil leaks. There's oil that runs with the refrigerant to lubricate the compressor. So if you get a refrigerant leak, you'll usually see it as an oil leak also. Speaking of oil leaks, this pipe here is the feed pipe to the front pump, and you'll notice that it's kind of starting to go green. It looks to me as if this is the original. It might not be, but it's starting to leak. These clamps that they use will tighten right up, so you can't over-tighten them. And this one appears to be tight, but you can see that there is some leakage there. So that's something that he's going to want to look into. Also on these mineral oil cars, you want to keep an eye on the brake pumps themselves. Do we have a light? We'll take a look at his brake pumps for him. They're a common source for a leak. I'm just going to use a flashlight so I don't get that extension cord on the top.
The brake pump.
So there is
there's a brake pump back here. Mm-hmm. There's another one right up here. And when I get a light, we'll take a look and see if they're starting to weep, which they can often do.
I often weep.
So this one back here we'll take a look at. It looks good. It's nice and dry. And the one on the front is just starting to get a little bit of oil haze on it, but it's not bad enough to want to do. Again, this is a really good car. Those of you who own one of these or are in the market for one of these, this is kind of how the car should be. So it's a really nice example, at least under the hood.
I've gone out of my way to make sure that all the things are correct. So the relays, the wiring.
As John pointed out earlier this morning, these gold cadmium Bosch relays are no longer available for these cars. They want to sell you a plastic covered one, which really aren't as nice looking. They perform the same function, but if you're trying to make the car look correct and original, this is what you want to see. Okay? Any questions? All right, I'm going to put it up in the air a little bit. Going up.
She says something about the mineral oil.
Keep an eye out for mineral oil. Alright, so starting at the back, we're going to look at his brake pads. There's plenty of material here. These are the rear rams for the car. Oftentimes people think that these are shocks. They're not. The actual shock absorber part of the car is the nitrogen-filled accumulator that's screwed into the top of them. These can commonly leak in two places. The return here, it can leak. This one's just starting to weep here. And then they'll actually leak all the way down the ram shaft here and pool up oil on the bottom. His brake pads are fine. It looks like he's got a newer set of low bros.
Of what?
Low bros, these constant velocity joints.
Okay.
They look nice. No tears in the boots. He does have a leak here on the differential, probably on the side seal. This could be one of two things. It's more than likely just the seal, but quite oftentimes the breathers can block up on these and push oil out of all the seals. This, I think, is just a side shaft seal.
Not right now. Don't put it out, John.
He's got a nail.
Oh, cool, yeah.
You want to try and keep an eye on these mineral oil calipers. They tend to like to leak in between the calipers. There's a set of O-rings that seal them. They can actually leak from two places: the piston seal and the seal that seals them up when you tighten them together. This one, I think, is just a little bit of oil residue left over from a brake bleed. So I don't see any leaks necessarily there. You do have quite a bad leak here in this top corner for that return.
Isn't that cute?
Oh wow. Got it?
Thank you.
This is the height control valve on the newer cars. You'll notice that it's connected to the sway bar. On the Shadows and on the earlier Spirit Spurs, Rolls-Royce went to all kinds of trouble with linkages and stuff. But this is the latest type. This car is a 20,000 series car, and this is the 20,000 series setup. These can leak from time to time. This one's good. You do have a fuel leak back here at the fuel pump.
Oh yeah.
This is the check valve here for the fuel pump. Some of you, and this is the accumulator. This is a noise dampening device that they put on the front of the fuel pumps to keep them quiet.
So the fuel leak is just at that shiny spot there.
Yeah, right here, right at this banjo fitting here, which looks like it's been doctored at one point. It looks like some solder or some epoxy or something on it. I'd look into getting a new banjo pipe for it and replacing that copper washer that's leaking. You might check and just double check, make sure that it's tight. The check valve for the fuel pump is located right here. Quite often people have problems starting these cars after they've been running for a long period of time, and that check valve can be one of the issues. The accumulator here can also be one of the issues too. So when your mechanic says you need a check valve or an accumulator, this is what he's talking about. These are the Hardy discs. They went to these with the Spirit Spur cars and did away with the universal joints. This Hardy disc is fine. It looks like it's been replaced not so long ago. The anti-roll roll bar rubbers both look good. There's no cracks in them.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
These struts here, John's replaced his. These struts are another common place for leakage. They can go bad. You should have those on your car. Yeah. People claim that they make a big difference in how the car feels and rides, and they do leak. It's a shock, just kind of like a conventional suspension shock, and they'll leak out.
My Frankenstein grass cage.
What do you mean your Frankenstein grass?
It's held together like Frankenstein.
Okay. This is nice to see. Rolls-Royce put these on so when people drove it out to the country club and parked over some leaves, it wouldn't light up on fire. They also put these on Shadows, but they put them all the way down the exhaust. This is obviously the catalytic converter here, and so that's the purpose of this metal shield. It's nice to see because quite often they get crushed or torn off somewhere and people just throw them away.
I do on occasion just take it off because it is the lowest hanging thing. Yeah, I take it off on purpose so it doesn't get crushed.
With a wrench instead of a
Yes, yes, exactly.
You'll notice that this engine's nice and dry. There's not a lot of oil leaks on this one. He does have a little bit of an oil leak starting at the back of the cylinder head. It could be a valve cover gasket. I noticed and should have pointed out to you guys earlier that John still has the cork valve cover gaskets. You have to keep up with those and tighten them down on every service. If John went to the neoprene type gaskets, he'd probably find that you don't have to service them. You just tighten them up and forget about them. Check the engine notes here. These are the rear engine mounts here. You've got two at the back and one at the front. John's look pretty good. Quite often what you'll see is these will start to separate and shift. The engine can run rough or be rougher running at idle than maybe you remember. So these need to be checked every once in a while. What else do I see? As far as the suspension goes, you have a compliance mount and caster adjustment, which is right here. You've got upper control arm bushings right here. John's both look okay. I was telling Bob this morning that if these upper control arm bushings go bad, it can quite often affect the compliance mount bushings. So if you let these go for too long, it'll tear out those bushings as well, which Bob had to have replaced on his car. But both of these look good. This is where you do your camber adjustment. There's a little tiny leak starting to form on his power steering hose. If we pull the webbing back, the heat shield webbing, you can just see that it's just starting to leak. His front engine mount looks good. Have you ever replaced the brake hoses on the car?
I don't recall.
Okay.
I don't think so.
It'd be a good idea to do. They're not as bad as the shadow and cloud hoses for blocking up, but it can still happen. You're supposed to replace them on the D service, and it doesn't look like these ones have ever been replaced, so that might be something. If John wanted to burn some money one day, that would be a good thing to spend it on.
Don't need those brakes working.
John doesn't stop, he just goes.
Yeah.
It's the other guy's problem to stop.
That's right.
On these ventilated, they went to the ventilated discs on the shadows in '73 with the compliant mount suspension, which this car has. You want to make sure that these anti-rattle clips are there and they're in the right position. This one is in the right position. And you'll notice that this one's in the top position, which is correct for the front caliper. All his suspension bushings look good. He might want to see where this oil's coming from. The oil is a big danger to the suspension bushings.
This had been leaking, so that's
the oil pan had been leaking.
So it probably came from that.
Okay, that's from the rear main seal. It's not so bad. But the oil will attack these suspension bushings and cause them to tear out, swell and go soft and tear out. Another thing we want to check is his steering shaft. There's a rubber hardy disc there, and these guys can crack and want to break, and then you'll find that the steering's not really all that responsive. There is a safety device in there to stop them from falling apart completely and losing your steering. But so there's the other end of this power steering hose. It's definitely a leaker. I'd want to get that replaced before it gets any worse. This car's so nice, it's easy to find priorities.
It's my daily driver.
Good for you.
If I don't drive it, it screams at me.
The belts look nice. They're all sitting high in the grooves. Yeah, the car looks good. Do you have any questions?
So the priorities would be the brake, the power steering hose.
Yes.
And
your mineral oil leaking at the back, because of course the mineral oil is shared with the brake system.
And the fuel leak.
And your fuel leak, yeah. And the valve covers, or whatever's leaking oil up top and a lot coming down. See at the back of the heads here, all this oil.
Oh, yeah, okay. Which is probably valve covers.
Probably valve covers. Probably still the cork. Well, they are still the cork ones. So either try and tighten them up or go to the neoprene type seals.
All right. Thank you very much.
To remove the fuel injection system to give the valve to the. In my 81, I can do that without. We'll talk about that when we look.
Okay.
So I should keep it then, right?
Keep this car?
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah. Now drive it off a cliff.
That or sell it to me.
Or that.
For a reasonable price.
That's right. All right.
Because what we determine reasonable is very subjective, isn't it?
We've argued that with the insurance company, haven't we?
Yeah, I'm big time.
This should be just scraped off or just left on? Well, that's
I
a
just
coating.
leave it on because it's the original coating that the factory put on. We do have a tiny little leak starting to go on the transmission modulator. This is the original one. It's just an O-ring that seals it. There's an air diaphragm, a vacuum diaphragm in there that tells the valve body when to shift. That's the original one. You might get that replaced, but it's very nice. It's all very original. It's got the original clamps and original hose on there, and it's the big modulator valve which they put on the cars originally. This is another thing I would try. Those are spacers, spring spacers.
So it's intentional.
Not from the factory. That there are things that you can buy at like Pet Boys or other such AutoZone, and they space the spring out so that the car sits higher.
Right. It takes away one of the 8 coils of the springs, essentially.
Exactly. And the ride is not as good. The reason people do it is because they can't correct the height of the car. You probably notice on these mineral oil cars that they want to sit down after they've been standing for a long period of time. I don't know why somebody did this, but I would certainly take them out before they bust the spring.
Never noticed.
The height control, of course, is controlled by the height control valve. You adjust it here, and very little movement gives you quite a bit of lift. So I would get those out of there before they...
Oh, so they're not even necessary?
They're not even supposed to be there yet.
But there's an adjustment that compensates?
Correct.
I get it.
Correct.
Interesting that they're only somebody must have wanted it to sit up higher.
That side John's drives on.
Well, yeah, right. Thank you very much. Thank you for letting me know I do need to lose another 50 pounds. Thank you.
They made a pejorative statement about you, John. That is so.
If John said on you every day, would you want some little spacer in you?
Yeah. And in fact, that's usually appropriate.
It's only a thing you will hear from friends.
I listen. No, I'm not subtle at all.
Yeah. Oh, well, we're going to have
Yeah, I got a little leak there.
Yeah, that's the fuel leak that we were wondering about.
I just saw what happened.
You want to get these little rubber boots over the terminals so that they don't corrode. But I do that when you attack the fuel leaks.
Yeah, I've never.
Okay, so you got to take the pump out.
Always been about
And do those brake hoses. You should be in good shape. It's a nice
Right.
car.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So let me see. I press a button.